Hey there, this is a short walkthrough of the Community Mapping Lab project on digitizing the 1958 Athens Directory. This is going to walk you through kind of what we have available to you, how to read the entries within the directory, and then how to enter information into the spreadsheet that we're using to clean the data. So if you're not already familiar with the 1958 City Directory, would encourage you to go to the Community Mapping Lab website, communitymappinglab.org, and look at the page on the 1958 City Directory. I've got a brief basic description here, a link to where you can download a PDF of the entire directory, as well as a link to our working spreadsheet. That's listed here. This was a directory that was created that's kind of like a phone book and a census combined together. There's some phone numbers. You can see one, for instance, right here, but it's mostly information about people who lived in the city at the time. And we're digitizing this information so we can start to better understand what the social geography was of Athens back in 1958 at the end of Jim Crow. We can look at things like racial segregation at the time, geographies of labor and where people lived, where people commuted, so understanding place of residence versus place of business, things like that. And so this web page here on the Community Mapping Lab site is the main resource to start with. Let me walk you through just a little bit of more background here to pull up some slides. So this spreadsheet that you're going to look at here in a second got created through taking that directory and doing some OCR, optical character recognition, basically running through the computer to see what could be read from those pages that you saw briefly earlier. And we're able to parse that a little bit. However, these systems aren't perfect. There's lots of cases where either information was read incorrectly or it was difficult to parse exactly what text should go where in our spreadsheet. And so we're trying to clean those pages down. We have about 18,000 entries, we think, in total, and we're about a third of the way there at the time I'm recording this. I'll come back to that spreadsheet in a second. So let's talk about how you read these data, though. So you can see here a sample from the city directory. I'm going to walk through what's listed here. So we've got, first of all, we've got names. So we can see who the people were who are living here. Often it's a man who's listed first and a spouse, a wife, listed in parentheses. It's not always a wife. Sometimes it's, say, a mother or another family member. So here we've got Warren S. Martin is listed here, and Mulatto M. Martin is listed as well. We've got Wesley Martin, Wesley J. Martin. It's bolded because they paid more money to have bold. And then Mabel with his wife, Wilder J. Martin here with Hazel B. Martin. You see how this works. There's also businesses, so like the Masonic Temple is listed here, and those are just listed along with the residential listings. There was no yellow pages in this. And so we differentiate in the spreadsheet between businesses and residential listings. We also have, in some cases, the number of dependents. Those dependents are not listed by name, but they are listed as a number. So Warren Martin's household had 2 dependents. Wilder and Hazel Martin's household had 4, et cetera, et cetera. You can see those red boxes. If the person listed owned their home, we have this circle H included here. So those are folks who either owned it outright or presumably had a mortgage, I believe. And so you'll see a few cases where we've got these green boxes around the circle H here, and we want to mark that down because it helps us understand the housing landscape at the time as well, where renters were and where, or homeowners were, and presumably then where renters were as well. There's a small marker here to denote race, particularly folks who are identified as colored. It's this circle C, kind of like a copyright symbol. Fred Massey is the only one on this page who's got that label on him. Then we've also got occupation, and these can really vary. They're often abbreviations. Early on in the directory, there's a code for how to read these. So we've got an engineer, an attendant, an assistant chief, a yard man, I think a practicing nurse, and you can see, and then students. And we have a special column just for students in the entry because we want to know where those students lived. So we've got the occupation, and then we've also got where they worked. And that's in brown here. So Westinghouse Electric Corporation. This person, I think, owned the W.J. Martin Well Company, but we list that under place of business here. They didn't necessarily work there. I think that's what the parentheses mean. Hensley Service Station. Chicopee Manufacturing Company was one of the main ones here. Here, this was a nurse, and this must have been the home where that person worked, where Ella Massey worked at the time. So you can see how that works. Householder versus renter, and householder basically means head of household. It was the primary person in that household, and so that's marked with an H, a little h here. And R doesn't mean renter, it means resident. So that's a person who lived in that house but was not necessarily the head of household in that case. And we don't know exactly how else is working. We're marking this down for now, but that's a householder versus resident. Home address is listed toward the end, so it's in these gray boxes, 279 megs. Here it says same, so Ella Massey worked and lived at 327 Hill, 829 Waddell Street. This is a rural delivery route 1, so we just put in RD1. Some of these are going to be tough to geocode. Winterville, Georgia, similarly here, kind of tough to locate, and a lot of out-of-town addresses are pretty vague. And then a phone number in some cases as well. This isn't a great example for that, but you'll see here there's a phone number listed at the very end. It just says call the long-distance operator and call the operator for Winterville, Georgia. But you'll often see like an LI-something as a phone number listed there as well. And so that's just kind of reading through it. These vary a lot, which makes it a little complicated to deal with. But once you do a few of them, you'll get the hang of how this all works. Let's talk about the spreadsheet process. So I'm going to pull over the spreadsheet here for how this looks. So we've got 2 tabs on the spreadsheet. And again, you can access this directly from the website. We've got a list of pages here that scroll down. There's about 300 and some pages, and you can see at the time when I'm recording this video, there's about 120 or so that have been done to some extent. So you're going to want to pick, in most cases, a blank page and put your name here, right? And then then you'll scroll over and find where that page is listed here. So if I wanted to find page, say 120, I would scroll through it here, or let's just stick with, here's a page 130. Nobody's done anything with page 130 yet. And then you would go through, you can find the variable names here for what these different columns mean, but you would take the information that you got from looking at the directory pages from this and enter it in here. So we've got the resident name, and you'd want to double check that that's correct. If that place is a business, and that's an organization, business or organization, so like the Masonic Temple would be the example here, you'd put a 1 here. This is a dummy variable, so it's either 1 or 0. 0 if it's a residential listing, like this one would be a residential listing. The number of dependents, whether or not that resident is labeled as colored or not, and I think we've got pretty good accuracy with this, but just double check it. That occupation, right? So if we go back here and look at these card HD, prac nurse, all these things, go in the resident occupation field. If it's a student, that's the occupation. Like here we see one, we'll have to clean this up because this H is here. Then we do a 1 here. And again, a lot of the times we caught this. The place where they worked, that place of business, goes under resident business. If they have that circle H, then we put a 1 in the own home column. Householder or resident is that H and R. So for instance, it would be H for this person, and we would just delete that H, and I'll just do that right here. And then this person is a resident, and so we've got that correct. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that there, right? And that would be how you clean it. For the address, we want to try to separate the street and the house number. So 490 South Lumpkin would go in 2 different columns. And then don't worry about this, because this will auto correct itself. Ooh, there's another error. I'm just going to clean that one up, and you'll see here. So this will autofill when you do it. If there is a phone number, you can list it here, and if there's any other notes that you want to put in regarding the entry that you think is worth noting, just stick that in here as well. So it's mainly just going through and making sure that all this is correct, filling in things like that business dummy or the dependent variables if those aren't listed as well. And that's about it. When you're done, or when you've done each one of these, put a yes in the checked column, column D. And then when you're done overall, you can see where a lot of folks have done this. When it says complete, put a Y in the complete column. Don't worry about this homeowner check needed. That's for data that we did originally that needs to be back and quality checked. So that's a basic overview of this process. Look forward to seeing your contributions to this project, and thank you so much for your interest in contributing to this effort to create a better history of Athens back in 1958.